afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome you to join us for this special event. Before we proceed, I would like to invite Professor Shu Qingzhou to deliver a few words of welcome. Professor Zhou is the Vice Director of the Research Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences, Ministry of Science and Technology in Taiwan. Let's welcome Professor Zhou.
On behalf of the Center of Humanities and Social Science, first of all, I would like to deliver my thanks, special thanks to Professor Michael Worton and also the participants for today's event. And the center actually is a platform to support and facilitate the social science and humanities communities in Taiwan. And this year, we just started the third phase, and our working agenda is try to promote and enhance the human dimensions of the climate change studies, neurosciences, and also artificial intelligence. So which means that the centers try to promote the interdisciplinary research on this new emerging field that the academic community and also the general public concerned the most. And also because this time we invite Professor Michael Worton to deliver a keynote speech tomorrow in the 2008 USR Expo that will be held in the stadium of this university. And then when I invited him, he proposed that he can also share with some of his other expertise, especially in the interdisciplinarity with the audience here. And I think that just just fit to the working agendas for the centers. So I try to promote the event. And I'm glad that this event is also supported by the USR centers and also the Association of Cultural Studies and the Association of Sociology. And also definitely I'm from Geography department, is also supported by my department. And anyway, because we only have a very limited time, so I will let today's chair, Professor Lin Chongyi, introduce the floor of today's event and also introduce our distinguished guest here. And Professor Lin, he is also one of the key core members for these centers. That's why we invited him to help us chair this session. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody. Professor Michael Worton just said that since I'm chair, I should control all this. I said no, I serve. So the whole agenda. Today we are going to have Professor Worton's talk, and then we have 80 minutes discussion panel. Yeah. And the topic here is interdisciplinarity and institutional change. Yeah. I think this is global interest in interdisciplinarity. Yeah. Taiwan shares with this interest. And here in Taiwan, many believe that it brings scientific breakthroughs in general, even across boundaries, disciplinary boundaries, or even within particular disciplines. And many believe it brings pedagogical change for the future study. Many even believe it can break down various boundaries, including institutional ones, they used to categorize a university, the very concept of a university. However, people from more endeavor interdisciplinarity face various obstacles, challenges, and issues, including among them, there are how should we conceive interdisciplinarity? How should we conceive the relationship between disciplinarity and interdisciplinarity. How do we support and esteem interdisciplinary research and teaching, which is very difficult, institutionally, nationally, and internationally. I think it's hard to find a better speaker, thinker, doer for a deeper understanding of these topics than Professor Michael Worton. Let's welcome Professor Michael Worton for his speech. Thanks.
Okay. Right. Professor Zhou, Professor Li, it's marvelous to be back in Taiwan, and especially to be back at NTU. You see the effect I have? I make things great, even without speaking. I believe passionately that universities matter. I believe also that universities are in danger of changing too much, too quickly, and losing their sense today of why they were originally founded. And in many ways, what I'll be talking about today, when talking about interdisciplinarity, and what I'll be talking about tomorrow, when I'm talking about public engagement, is based on the fact that I believe that the university system is not in crisis, but it is in need of change. We need to be fit for purpose for a world which is actually changing very, very quickly. So I'd just like to run through some of the key changes that are happening to us at the moment, if I can work with technology. Right. Always, since the university system was created, technically about 1,000 years ago in Italy, in Bologna, universities have known how to change. How do I stop this? Ah, perfect. Now, in the 21st century, what is happening, I think, is that we are actually trying to encourage much wider participation. This is one of the main agendas of the 21st century. How do we get more different kinds of students coming to study with us? How do we actually internationalize our universities in terms both of the staff and of the students, in terms of mental, intellectual internationalization, and also physical mobility, welcoming, and also going abroad? The whole question of innovation and the role that we have to play in terms of helping the science and the economy of our various countries to move forward. Impact, increasingly important around the world, and by this it means impact on the whole of society and not simply on our fellow teachers and our fellow researchers. And public engagement and interdisciplinarity. And you see, these last two that have been interestingly, particularly for the last 2 years, especially as for 5 years now I've been associated with a new university in Paris, PSL, which defines itself as an interdisciplinary university. It has one major problem. It is one university with 21 autonomous institutions, each of which has enormous prestige. How do you get 21 autonomous institutions to be one single institution? And how do you then put interdisciplinary in all of that? Now, the underlying principles for the university, and I think it's worth remembering these, are that we want to discover or to create new knowledge. That must be one of the drivers of our jobs as academics. And we must provide education and training of the highest quality. And it's that juxtaposition of the educational dimension and the research dimension, which I think is something which occasionally we lose a little bit. Research has taken over as the great God before whom we must all genuflect. And teaching is all too often, across the world, seen as a secondary activity. I think this is actually something which has gone too far. But above all, we must be committed to excellence. If we forget our commitment to excellence, we are on a road to nowhere. Now, why interdisciplinarity? Well, the reasons are pretty common and understood, especially as we are all much more concerned about global activities, not only about our local, national issues, but as Professor Joe was talking about, issues like climate change are issues which affect every one of us in every country. Issues like inequality, issues like poverty, all of these are things which need solutions which come from looking at things from a whole range of different perspectives. We also want to advance knowledge by challenging received ideas and also by challenging some of the existing theories. The kind of thing that I was taught when I was an undergraduate 40 years ago are things which today are no longer in fashion. This need not necessarily mean they are wrong, but they no longer have the power that they once had. And I think we need to be constantly in a position whereby we are questioning. Some things will remain eternal, other things need to change, and indeed, I've argued elsewhere that sometimes some disciplines perhaps need to disappear and transform themselves into something else. I think one of the great things about interdisciplinarity is it does open up new research fields and indeed new disciplines. We can also provide much broader undergraduate and master's and doctoral programs. One of the main challenges being that there isn't enough interdisciplinarity, true interdisciplinarity at the undergraduate level. It's a bit more about pick and mix or about learning a broad approach rather than an interdisciplinary approach, which is actually a much more systemic approach to epistemology. And we want to have greater societal, social impact. We also want to be cited in places which are not only high-impact academic journals. And I think it is very important that we do actually want the general public to understand what we do in our universities. So the drivers for growth, government want interdisciplinarity because they want these global problems to be resolved as effectively as possible. And big issues, again, it's something that Professor Joe mentioned, artificial intelligence is going to transform our societies. But this is not a technological problem alone, it's a social problem, it's a human problem, there are all kinds of areas which need to be brought into it. Issues like migration, which are one of the causes of most of the conflicts around the world, the rise of terrorism, and so on, these all need multidisciplinary, first of all, but then crucially interdisciplinary approaches. Universities see IDR, interdisciplinary research, as a means of actually becoming pioneers in the world. It's about being a leader in the creation of new knowledge. It's also about defining or redefining the university as a centre of problem solving. And I think we've too often become known as places of privilege and places of knowledge, but not necessarily as those who solve the problems, which are the problems of the man, woman and child in the street. And disciplines which we now accept as existing have come out of interdisciplinarity, like cognitive science, like gender studies, biomedical engineering and neuroscience. So it is about transforming the nature of the university itself. And academics like interdisciplinarity because it is intellectually very, very challenging. It's about curiosity, how we work together, and how we can constantly push back the frontiers of the knowledge as we know it, and how we can better scrutinise our own disciplines. Sometimes disciplines can become protectionist, sometimes they can be smug, sometimes they can be self-satisfied. But when you're faced with an interdisciplinary team, you have to question the first principles of your own discipline. And I think that's actually one of the great joys as well as the great challenges that interdisciplinarity brings to us. Now, the recent history shows just how much interdisciplinarity has become one of the great driving engines of international policy on universities. Science Europe, which is probably one of the most powerful collective funding organisations for research, has argued that one of the keys to the future scientific breakthrough is in interdisciplinarity research. Nature, I think probably the world's most influential academic journal. Certainly in terms of impact factor, it is by far the leading one. But Nature actually took interdisciplinarity so seriously in terms of science, as it said, we must actually look at this in a special number where we will bring ideas and perspectives from right across the scientific spectrum. The Global Research Council, which is all of the national funders, including the US, Chinese Academy of Sciences, Research Councils UK, all of the major funders back in 2000 in May published a very, very important groundbreaking survey of interdisciplinarity, showing how the different paths are emerging across the various countries on our globe. And in my own country of the UK, it's actually been enshrined in government policy. So this is one of our major strengths, and what will actually distinguish us in terms both of pure science research and in terms of innovation strategy. And interestingly, even the private sector has come in. But in Germany, the second largest, after the big national funding council, the DFB, there is the Volkswagen Foundation, which has pronounced that interdisciplinarity is absolutely one of its key priorities. But, as I point out here, it has no committees to foster interdisciplinarity, and it has no way of evaluating interdisciplinarity separately. So this is actually one of the paradoxes of what's happening in institutions and at the national level. Everybody says interdisciplinarity is a good thing. We should all be doing interdisciplinarity, but we're not going to put in place the mechanisms that will actually enable all of it to happen effectively and speedily. And so in many ways, the rest of my talk is going to be about the challenges that we are facing and how perhaps at the institutional level we can address this. We noticed, though, however, in analysis of our own UK's research assessment excellence, that this analysis was published 2 years ago, and it says that, interestingly, we didn't get many people who put in interdisciplinary submissions to the national assessment because people were uncertain that they would be evaluated properly, because there was no interdisciplinary panel. So if you were doing something in physics, but you're working with film studies, let us say, you wouldn't be sure that the film studies was evaluated properly or that the physics was evaluated properly. But it would probably go to the physics panel, and then how would actually the groundbreaking stuff being done by the film studies on exoplanets, let us say, which is some research going on in Paris, how would that be evaluated by physicists? And yet, when people had the courage actually to put in interdisciplinary submissions, they discovered that the highest scoring of all of the research projects across all of the disciplines had interdisciplinary research at its very core. So that's one piece of evidence we've got now that will help us, I think, to argue for having specialist interdisciplinary panels in all national evaluations. And we are now in the UK considering how we can most effectively create panels where the experts are expert at working in interdisciplinary ways, as well as having stellar disciplinary expertise in their own disciplines. And in a very interesting report that came out in 2015, which was looking at all of the world's research, they said that there is a trend towards interdisciplinary research, but where the greatest speed is happening is in two countries which are seen as emerging research countries. That's one of Brazil, and the other one is of mainland China. And it's interesting that they have had the courage to put in more interdisciplinary work up for international submission. And that notion of, is it because they are young in terms of their traditions of research funding that they have been able to do this, or is it for some other reason? So we now have got some intercultural and inter-country research going on to try and work out why Brazil and mainland China have got this advantage in terms of speed. So what is it? Now, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on this, and the slides will be available afterwards, but I just want to show you that we can spend a great deal of time talking about what it is or what it may be. And This is one of the ones that was published by all of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine in the US. And basically it's what most of us would come up with. It's when we're actually putting together expertise from two or more disciplines together. That takes us so far that it doesn't kind of express what I would claim is the essence of interdisciplinarity. This is a very, very interesting argument made by one of these, Andrew Barry is a neuroscientist and Peter Bourne is a sociologist and anthropologist. And what they have seen is that interdisciplinarity is now a governmental demand. Governments want interdisciplinarity. They may not know exactly what it is, but they know they want it. What they've got to do now is find out how they can provide the kind of funding that will give them what they want. Above all, within the university, interdisciplinarity is itself a place for reflecting on what we do in our own discipline. And I think that's one of the most important things that it gives to us all as researchers, helping us to understand who and what we are. And it has now already become, in its own right, an object of knowledge, something which has been scrutinized in epistemological terms and even in ontological terms. But my favorite definition is given by a professor, Moti Nisami, who's an American professor. And I just find this is so simple. It is maybe a little bit simplistic, but it helps me a great deal. He says, think of your disciplines as fruit. So, you know, physics can be an apple, and biology is a banana, and philosophy is a mango, whatever. But they are different kinds of fruit. And so, in disciplinarity, you can serve them separately. And this is monodisciplinarity. So you savor the mango, you savor the banana, you savor the apple. You appreciate them in their own specificity. But then there's a second stage when you think, actually, I would really like a fruit salad, when I can actually taste these different things together. And in the same mouthful, I can taste a bit of banana, I can taste a bit of orange, and so I have the sense of, you know, a little bit of physics, a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of law. And then you get to the stage of the interdisciplinarity, as Professor Nisami says, when you've got the smoothie, when actually you can't discern exactly where the mango is, or you have the hints of mango, you have the hints of banana, but actually they are all created into one, which is almost like a homogeneous, beautiful drink. So in a sense, I find that quite useful, because it shows the way in which the disciplinarity of disciplines becomes progressively kind of dissolved into a wider entity, which is actually a transformation of itself. There's a kind of osmosis from separation into coexistence into one osmotic system in the smoothie. And just to give you the reference for it, it's in a journal of educational thought, but he's been arguing for a long time, and it is very simple, but it's actually quite thoughtful. The academic issue now, this is what we all say we're doing. We function through pooling of different banks of knowledge, through different kinds of perspectives, and I would argue with different perspectives and prejudices. The pooling often leads to modification, and this is a very good thing, because it makes us look at our own subject and say, well, if I'm a historian, and I'm working on a project with a literary scholar, we look at the way that the history of, let us say, war has been written from very, very different perspectives. And we learn where the weaknesses of our own discipline are, but also where the strengths are. So the pooling of disciplines, I think, does lead to us thinking how we might change our own disciplinary behaviour. And it means that we understand the disciplines better, but crucially, and that's something that Professor Joe and I have been talking about a lot over the last 24 hours, it's the different disciplinary languages. We all think we're speaking the same language, be it English or Mandarin or German or French, but actually, the language of philosophy is a very different language from the language of history or the language of medicine. And that very often we have to be engaged constantly in a process of translation, which is a very good way of training us to be able to communicate better to wider audiences who don't speak the specialist languages of university disciplines. And this is, I get into trouble when I argue this, but I think in some ways what has happened from the Second World War onwards is that there became an increasing professionalization of the university subject. That in our own subjects we became much more professional, much more specialized, and actually what that led to was such great specialization that actually we led to a kind of tribalism, a kind of inward-lookingness, and that this also then led to a certain narrowing of focus, because it was if you were going from looking at something with a telescope, looking at it in the far, and then reducing down to the microscope and seeing only one slide on the microscope plate. And so very often there can be a kind of isolation in information silos, and we want to have more porosity, more seepage, more slipping between the silos of the disciplines. But, and this is where we need to remember, you can't have good interdisciplinarity unless you have strong disciplinarity. The two are engaged in a very complex, it's like a dance together. They move together all the time. As disciplines become changed by interdisciplinarity, so they change interdisciplinarity itself, but they change themselves, they are changed. And I think this is why it is such a key to innovation within the disciplines. So that it's a kind of interdependence and a reinforcement by disciplinarity of interdisciplinarity and vice versa. And now I'll go through where we have some challenges. For researchers, there are big questions asked about national esteem. Where the world of academic careers can be ruled by publication in research journals, especially by citation indices, high impact factor journals, and so on, there's a question of how am I going to be perceived? In order to be perceived, I need to be published in the best places. And for that, these high impact journals, these are mainly disciplinary journals. They come out of a tradition of the discipline, so there is an anxiety about publishing there, and as well as the anxiety of publishing there, there's also the sense that they feel that they won't be accepted and that they won't be understood. They're worried that in their own department they won't be seen as specialist enough to be returned to national evaluations. And this is why they feel that we won't try and get into the high impact factor because we won't get in. Therefore we'll go for lower impact. So there's a kind of self-defeating vicious circle whereby they destine themselves to lack of esteem because they believe the system is not ready to reward them. And this I think is a real problem which we're beginning to understand, but we haven't yet changed. And there's a lot of evidence that hiring panels, when they're hiring new staff, would say actually, in my own field, let us say of French literature, they would say we really need someone who's a specialist on 18th century philosophical writing. We've lost our specialist in 18th century philosophy, so what we need is another 18th century philosophy. If you like, it's the curse of the same. We must maintain our department as covering all of the sub-disciplines. And very often panels will say, well, we don't have the evidence that this person actually has published enough on the one narrow area that we want them to be in. They wouldn't be evaluated by peers in the 18th century philosophy. Oh dear. So there is a question of anxiety on the part of the researchers. What will they be treated properly? Justified anxiety. And there's also the fact that you need special kinds of skills, or you need to acquire special skills if you're going to work in an interdisciplinary team. Because connecting teams is hard enough across your own discipline. When you're working across people who have different traditions, even different traditions of work hours. I mean, the work hours of somebody in the humanities, in terms of contact hours, is very different from somebody in the fundamental sciences. And so there are big issues about working across these boundaries. And if there's one thing that you retain from what I say today, it is that I believe that in the modern world we have to live and work in and with difference. We are surrounded by difference. Similarity is what makes us feel comfortable, but difference is what makes us feel powerful and opens our mind to new ways of thinking. And that's what interdisciplinary work is doing. That's what interdisciplinarity is forcing us to live constantly in and with difference. And so I think it's a way of life as much as it is an intellectual mode and a very, very good methodology for our research. And there is also the fact that different disciplines have very different notions of what is rigor, what is evidence. We find this especially in when governments report commission reports, which are across many, many disciplines, and they say, well, actually the sociologists were saying this about what was happening in a particularly pure area, but the anthropologists had a slightly different view of it. And the anthropologists took this seriously, but the sociologists were actually, the quantitative sociologists were very nervous about this. And so very often there are issues of friction. And I will actually give you a quote in a moment for you to think about later, about two colleagues who have spent the last 20 years of their lives trying to work in interdisciplinarity and saying, it is actually quite hard. It's incredibly exciting, but it can also be really hard work, and we need to be ready for that. And there is still this problem that while there is evidence in the research assessment, the national research assessment, of interdisciplinarity being in almost all of the top-rated research submissions, the citation impact is much lower for interdisciplinary research across all the countries, including Brazil and China and so on. But, this is the other side of it, if you look not at research output, but at patent applications, there's a much higher citation rate of interdisciplinary research. So that's actually a very, very useful argument when we're talking about the commitment to innovation and so on, when we're talking with governments, that the need to take forward IDR across our own disciplines. So we need to learn the languages well enough to talk to other people. We need to know our own languages. First, we need to know our own languages and realize their own specificity and how they are very special and very different. Then we need to learn how we can understand the other language and how we can translate each other's languages to each other. And the essence, I think, of interdisciplinarity lies in this recognition, first of all, and then exploitation of the creative potential of difference. So in many ways, the argument that I'm making is a philosophical argument about the nature of education and research, as much as about what people might see purely as a methodological approach to research. But I'm coming on now to the real challenges for individual people. This is what was written by Felicity Callard and Des Fitzgerald, the two people I was talking about. They interestingly speak of the fact that we are tribes, the different tribes of the disciplines. And in the university, in a sense, we all are one family. When I've been leading universities, I speak about, the UCL family, or in Paris I talk about the PSL family. We are one family. But within that family, there are tribes. And within those tribes, there are very, very particular ways of thinking, ways of behaving, ways of interacting. And this pair actually published this book, which is it's on free open access. It's worth your while just downloading the whole thing from the website I've written there. Because what they talk about is how difficult it was for them. They have always been committed to doing work across the neurosciences especially, and the social sciences. But they said, actually, people got angry with us for talking about what was difficult about interdisciplinarity. We were talking how difficult it is to get research funding. We were talking about how difficult it is to bring people together, trying to persuade people to go out of their usual timetable of research teaching, administration and so on, in order to make place for these complicated, messy, difficult discussions. And so it's not all about joyful harmony where we all sing the same hymns together. And I love the way they talk about this, as we have been trying in this group, talking about their own experience, to describe the strange, unequal, and sometimes fractious rhythms that can hold researchers together. And in many ways, in research, interdisciplinary research teams, the relationships are very unequal. But what's interesting is that the inequality is like a kind of wave curve. It goes up and down. At one moment it will be the hard scientist within the ascendant, and then the hard scientist is less important in one part of the thinking as the humanity or the social sciences come up. And so it's an issue of learning to gain and exert power and give up power and influence as you go through the research project. So it's very much about learning how to be much more flexible in the actual practice of interdisciplinary research. So how do we actually make the change happen? Well, the problem is that most of our universities are developed on disciplinary grants. Departments, they sometimes change their names, but they will always have names of disciplines. And this does lead to some, there is some flexibility in universities. I'm not saying they're completely stern in everything. They try and make some flexibility, but actually it is difficult because of the disciplinary powers. We accept that fine artists have a different need for funding from, let us say, a biologist, or from an astrophysicist, or from a chemist. So the universities are used to some level of flexibility, but to have flexibility for everyone all the time becomes much more difficult, and that's what a full embracing of interdisciplinarity would lead to. So we need to look at new models. Now, one way is to go down the route that many of us have taken of creating interdisciplinary institutes. And their success in the United States has kind of waned a little bit. But I think the rest of the world has actually seen that this is a very, very good way forward. And things like urban studies are terribly, terribly important, because it's not, the architects do not know everything about cities. And the social scientists don't know everything. And the philosophers don't know everything. But together they can actually understand what exactly a city is, what it has been, what it can be, and so on. I think increasingly introducing true interdisciplinary programs is a very good way forward. One of the things I'm most proud of at UCL was actually creating the first truly interdisciplinary undergraduate program in Europe a few years ago, in which you don't just pick and mix. It's not like a liberal arts degree. It's where you are forced to take courses together. Every student has got to work in a lab, even if they're not interested, they have got to work in a lab. They've got to work in industry. They have got to take a course in quantitative reasoning. They've got to take a course in subjective value judgment and so on. In PSL in Paris, which is essentially a graduate university, we have created an undergraduate program which scares everybody in France, because it is not traditional. It is very, very deliberately and in a mandatory way interdisciplinary, where students have got to learn the different languages from the very beginning of the sciences, the humanities, the social sciences, and so on. And just as we speak, the University of Hong Kong, not very far away, they are putting together a portfolio of new Bachelor of Arts and Sciences. It should be said based on the UCL model, but they are doing some very interesting things of its own, notably in experiential learning. So these are some of the things I think which are making a change. But one of the key things to change is actually leadership. There needs leadership at the top of the university, but it also means we need to find mentors, champions for the younger colleagues who come along, to give them the comfort and the confidence actually to go ahead with this and show them ways to work, and people who will argue at the highest level in universities about the importance of the kind of structures and the kind of mechanisms that we need in place if we're going to allow interdisciplinarity research to flourish. And I think also we can do a lot by foregrounding our interdisciplinary work in all of the work that we do, engaging with the public in every way. And crucially, by talking about interdisciplinarity in every single strategic plan that we write. And certainly at UCL I was absolutely vicious about this, that I would not allow any strategy to go forward to our council for approval unless it had explicit references to interdisciplinarity and indeed to public engagement, and put it into criteria for promotion and so on and performance appraisal. And we use funding streams which are specifically for interdisciplinary research, so they're not in competition to disciplinary work. Now, organisationally, how do we reconcile the traditional disciplinary approach with the cross-cutting structures that we need? How do we organise funding and other kinds of resource allocation? How do we change our human resources? Because in a sense, it should not be just another add-on. We need to be thinking about how we allow this in everything from timetabling to workload allocation to promotion to the way that departments engage with their staff and so on. We need to think about how hiring for interdisciplinarity is encouraged in every job that is being advertised, in promotion, in retention, performance appraisal, incentives. It's not all about money. I don't believe it's all about money. But money does count, and so we must make sure that there are some incentives. But there are things like time and other kinds of resource that can make a massive difference. I've never believed that money is what drives academics forward. It's needed, people need to live and we need to live comfortably. But actually we are driven, I think, as a community by something nobler than simply the desire for more money. And then mentoring, I think, is actually absolutely vital and something in place. And structured professional development and career advice. And this needs to be put in place quite explicitly so that everyone can see it. Now, one possible solution is the radical solution which was taken up by one of the youngest universities in the world, Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology in Japan, who said we will have no funds. And then PSL, which has got its 21 institutions, so you've got the School of Mines, you've got the Observatory of Paris, you've got École Normale Supérieure with all of its great departments. But all of these departments which are based on disciplinary excellence. And they've actually decided that they're going to move away from having departments and having thematic areas, which will be, if you like, the structures into which people belong, which will be interdisciplinary ones, and which will change over time. Because this is quite difficult, especially much as I love France and the French can be very traditional. And we're actually struggling in a way with our staff in PSL as we try to say to them, no, you're going to live in a world which is more like the real world, the world of flux. The ancient Greek philosophers of 2,000 years ago understood that the world is fluid. It's in a process of becoming and changing. That is the nature of the world. And so the university, to be a microcosm of the world, needs to understand how it can become more fluid. It's easy to say, it's not so easy to do. But I think it is one solution that we are trying to work towards, certainly in Paris in PSL, and we're making some progress with it, and finding real champions, not only with the young, but also some of our most senior professors. And essential changes in the research funding body, be they government, be they private, be they philanthropic, be they business, and so on, of actually saying you need to have specialist panels which are interdisciplinary panels, actually, to evaluate the applications. And so we need increasingly to have international peer reviewers. It's another element of difference that we need to bring in. The way that you think about universities in Taiwan, for instance, is actually quite different than we do in Britain or the way we do it in France. And I mean, this is one thing I admire enormously about the University Social Responsibility Program. Every time I come to Taiwan, I discover something where I think you're doing something that we should have been doing and have not been doing, and we will copy you quite unashamedly. I think it's it's terribly important that we are willing to experiment with the nature of the structure of our university. Student issues is actually quite a problem. Really quite rapid increase in the number of true interdisciplinary programs, not pick and mix supermarket degrees, but structured interdisciplinary programs, which train people in working in interdisciplinary ways. At the master's level, we're finally having this. When I was trying to introduce the Bachelor of Arts and Sciences, they said that they would never get onto a master's program at Stanford or Yale or MIT or Cambridge or whatever. And I said, they will. And these students are getting master's programs, getting scholarships into MIT, into Harvard, into Yale, into Cambridge, into LSE, and so on. And so I think that we are beginning to prove that actually it is just a different route forward right up to the doctoral area. And we find an increasing number of students wanting to work in interdisciplinary ways, notably in the UK, where actually this has come from within the doctoral centres themselves. They have almost all chosen to be interdisciplinary. Students have multiple supervisors in different departments with both single and joint supervision, and it sounds great. On paper it looks great, but the trouble is that the students love to feel that they've got a project which is theirs. They're the only person who can make sense of it all. Because let's say an art historian will know all about the art history, but won't necessarily know about the history, or won't really know about the chemistry of the paint as it was created chemically in the 17th century or whatever. So they kind of feel that they know how everything works together. But they report, and we're finding this coming from across many countries in the world, there's a lack of support and guidance. They get fantastic support in the disciplines, and they get some fantastic support for their project of working together, but they're not given support in actually the pure core of what is the interdisciplinary dimension of what they're doing, and how can they actually how do they create the smoothie and move it away from just the fruit salad that they were having before. And the challenges of learning the languages is actually an extra element in terms of the research training. It takes a long time to learn another language and then to be able to translate between them. And one PhD student said to me that, and he's a brilliant student, and he said, it's fantastic, every one of my supervisors is absolutely brilliant, and they give me lots of advice and they really want to help me, but I feel alone because I am the only one trying to keep all of these fruit together in the bowl, trying to make them in the smoothie. I'm the only one juggling all of the plates together, so I feel very alone. And so we need to be aware that that human quality of loneliness, we actually do need to do something serious about that. I mean, it's a mental health issue. And we need, in other words, much more focused support for interdisciplinary research. So this is why, to conclude, I move towards saying, I think it is actually about a conceptual need. Universities want to be ever more fit for purpose in a very complex, hyper-globalized way. And this is why I think we need to remember the principles on which we were founded all those centuries ago. Universities can and should be drivers of economic and social change. They must be. But they must, above all, I believe, passionately, they must be a public good. They're not good just for those who go to university or those who work in university. They must be good for the whole of society. We have forgotten that a bit in the modern world. From the medieval beginnings, freedom of thought and freedom of speech has been a defining characteristic of universities. And this is something that every academic would say. Well, in most countries, every academic would say freedom of speech is absolutely crucial. And yet, I have been in rooms with some of my dear, esteemed colleagues when they would be vitriolic, vicious, especially if I'm here thinking about some debates we had about medical humanities, and they would say that, how can you possibly expect us to send a student to do a one-year intercalated honours degree in medical humanities when they will study literature and study philosophy, when that has no scientific base whatsoever? And I said, what do you mean it has no scientific? I said, it does not have your scientific base. It is not hypothesis testing in the sense that you may think of science as being hypothesis testing, but it has an issue which is just as important to the way that we move forward, which is that of value judgment and actually making interpretations. When I was teaching literature to medical students, the first 2 weeks they were terrified with me, because at one point I said to them, oh no, there are many different valid readings of a poem, many different ways of reading a poem. And they said, okay, so there's no one right reading. There are many possible valid reasons. And then one day, one of my most brilliant students said, gave an interpretation of one of the lines in the poem. I said, no, sorry, that's wrong, that's wrong. He said, hang on a minute, no. You said all readings are valid. I said, no, I said many readings are valid. There is no right answer. There are many possible right answers, but there are also wrong answers. And the wrong answers are when you misread the grammar or whatever. And for them, they find it very difficult to see that in the humanities we work in grey, whereas he was used to working in black and white, where he knew the difference between right and wrong and could test very quickly the differences between right and wrong. And we also grew out of the monastic tradition. And I think it's worth remembering this, that we grew out of a tradition which was about people learning together and people travelling to learn. And indeed, they were in the 12th century, nearly 1,000 years ago, there was a charter made for the whole of the Holy Roman Emperor, the whole of what we think of as modern Europe and most of the Middle East, was all about being able to go wherever you wanted to learn, because you learn from different traditions. And this is why I think universities need to be fully open to the diversity and difference that we proclaim as we talk about our commitment to internationalization. But actually, we need to learn to be much more open to diversity and difference. So I think that interdisciplinarity has a crucial role to play, both as a research and a teaching practice, and also as a theory of life, which is a theory of difference, both a scientific method and a way of life. It won't be easy to embed interdisciplinarity fully in the university. It will have big implications for the way that we run our universities and our pedagogy, but on the other hand, enormous opportunities for not only research teaching enterprise, but about institutional identity, collegiality in the way we work as a community, and community engagement with the wider world. The world is complex. We have responsibility to address this complexity through our teaching. Through embracing interdisciplinarity, we can actually finally make ourselves fit for purpose. Now is the time therefore to change, and if you like, this enables us to review and renew ourselves as universities and to reclaim our role as pioneering and transformational social institutions, which both we make lives better, individual lives better, and we make society stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Worton. Now it's the session for dialogue and discussions. I would like to invite the speaker, Professor Michael Worton, the moderator, Professor Chong-Yi Lin, again, and the three panelists to participate in the session. They are Professor Ming-Chong Lin from the Department of Physics of the National Taiwan University, Professor Wen-Zhen Zhang from the College of Law of the National Taiwan University, and Professor Da-Wei Fu from the Institute of Science, Technology and Society of the National Yangning University. Please welcome.
This panel has 18 minutes, and first round we are going to have each commentator have 10 minutes comments, and let's start with Professor Lin Tong. Yeah.
I simply start because I'm abnormal too. Okay, and how abnormal I am, I think I would like to share some experience for my recent working for coordinating interdisciplinary projects in the Ministry of the Science and Technology. We call the name is towards the innovative technology with the social demand at the core. So basically this is the purpose and the main goals. I think and in the panelists we invited several experts from or convener from a different department. For example, from physics department, I'm from the nature science, and we also invited the chemists, and we also invited social scientists, and also we even try to invite the CV think tank, some people working for as a CV think tank as economics and something. So then we have a totally different goal and we have a different purpose. In the following, I would like to share. I think the most of my experience come from this one. Okay. So for me, interdisciplinarity actually is the concept of self-contradiction. So because if we go back to maybe 2,000 years ago, so we go back to the time of Aristotle. So as a philosopher, if you enter the house, the palace of the philosophy, you will go to the right, maybe, okay, go to the right is a theoretical philosophy. And go to the left, you will have practical philosophy. You can learn something from the library. And then you can find a small room with different field, different interests. Psychology, physics, of course, and biology. So you have different things. But we all call these guys as philosophers. So the philosopher actually are, by nature, is interested in different disciplines. I think right now, as we are discussing, we have many disciplines. We have so many department institutions
So in the modern university, we have a lot of the, and even right now, so in the modern time, if we go into the kindergarten time, so when you are a kid working or playing in the kindergarten, you will feel, you will learn from the world, like nature, from your family, from your society, from the nature, from a different aspect. You are a philosopher. But when you grow up, go into the so-called official system of education, you will be divided into different experts, okay? And with agents, it can even go into even worse. You go to the university, you become a physicist. So I think before I entered the university, I never think I'm a physicist. I'm maybe a thinker or philosopher. I'm just interested in knowledge. But if you finish your PhD, or even you finish your bachelor degree, or you will be classified or category, going to the category with physics. As a physicist, usually you will be classified as a person with very limited knowledge of the philosophy, with only very strange behavior, like Einstein, for example. So you are not abnormal people, but you are a normal physicist. So that's the understanding usually here. I think that this is my understanding. So this is why I think that interdiscipline is already a concept of self-contradiction to overcome the artificial gap. Okay. So because we create, our system create an artificial gap from a different aspect. And right now we want to overcome the gap artificially. Okay, we intend to overcome this gap here. That's my first understanding. And to overcome is, of course, very difficult because you are already not only classified by outside, but already, I would say, you will already be shaped with the time, in particularly when you become a professor. So you are already recognized with some expertise. So you are already classified, already limited in your field. You should not talk too much about politics. You should not talk too much about economics. You need to make more effort to prove that you are also able to discuss with the people from the economics. That's my personal experience. Okay. So you face the challenge from the outside. from my experience here when you discussing some important issue. So then I think the starting point is of course one starting point. I think particularly Professor Chen Dongsheng and also Zhou Shuqing. So they are working since long. I think with education and with the social network, and try to change the concept of the people, not only the student, not only within the university, but also outside the society. But my starting points will be a little bit different. So my starting points as when I was the convener of the physics department, physics division of the MOST, I think maybe we can start to try to solve the problem which we all concern. Okay, that's interesting. Is there any problem we all concern? That is a question. And to solve the problem from different ways or aspects. Because we know, for example, the air pollution, for example, if you ask the engineer, or you will say, so technology will solve all the problem. If you give me sufficient money, I will give you high tech to solve the problem. If you ask the people from the law school, they will say, no problem. If you, maybe they don't need so much money. If you give me some good law system, we will control everything. Okay, but I think the starting point, maybe we are starting from the same thing, but we were made also from different discipline. We will also made a different way to solve that. We will provide a different methodology. We will imagine a different finite goal for the even common problem. Okay, we have different imagination. That is also the problem or the difficulty for so-called interdisciplinary research. So then I think the teamwork become very important. You need to, in your team, you need to combine different experts from the different disciplines. And another important precondition is they need to work together peacefully. That is very difficult to let some expert, in particular they are all professors, work peacefully within one group. Okay, so for 3 years, that is very difficult. I faced a lot of complaints from different experts. They will say not only the problem of the money. Okay, this is the money is still a small issue. So they need to face the diagram debate, identify the common goal and the path. That is the most difficult part. Even you face the very simple problem, for example, the air pollution, or the medical care, for example. So there's a different way to that for that. And we have also some project with the topic of the big data, so on, with a user from economics, with a user from I think from the public health, the public health people, and also with a user with some people from the law school here. So the criterion for that one, for the precondition for such kind of the healthy working together, you need to be open-minded for the new thing. That is, I think, our very difficult part for a group with so many professors working together. Another difficult thing, and another very important thing, maybe also the NGO, because we are talking about here more about the education system, the university. They are all well-trained experts. So, but sometimes for the public issue, the public problem, if you go to the society, go to the NGO, you will get a totally different expert. I think this is also important. So in this program, we encourage the people to work together with NGO. That's actually we learn also a lot from you. And the interesting outcome from this experiment is, so they can also, from the feedback from the NGO, they can try to change the design of their technology. So for example, we have a so-called the medical care in the countryside is very difficult, and they work together with NGO, and they knew what the people really like to have. And they will not copy always only the technology from the overseas, from the foreign overseas. And they will create their own technology. And this is also important for the innovation technology. This is also one of our goals here. So the innovation, I think, or creativity will get benefit from the interdisciplinarity and beyond our own field here. I will also admit, I think research, of course, is also a kind of education. I would like to emphasize that. We usually limited our education in a kind of form with course, seminar, and some activity, but actually research itself, or learning that try to solve the problem, is a very, very primitive way to educate yourself. I think the things from when we are in kindergarten here. So I would like to emphasize also this point here. So then, everything here, we face the problem or deviation from the different experts. I would like to summarize some important things where usually we had a lot of problem here. So one thing is core value. It's very difficult. So the core value starting for every expert is different. That's not only the methodology, but also the core value. Core value from different expert. So what is your finite goal, and what is the most important thing, value system in your discipline is well defined. But if you go beyond your discipline, so you need to face. So everyone, I think, every expert has his own core value. And how can you working with different core value and work for one public common problem? That is a big problem, actually. So then the second thing is fundamental research. So you need fundamental research. You need to have a long-term research, and even for the interdisciplinarity. I think that you need to have a long-term. For example, you need to have major data. You need to appreciate different truths, maybe partial truths from different experts. And you need to do more deep understanding and so on. This fundamental research. And of course, you mentioned also methodology and analogy. And the outcome. What kind of outcome we expect? This is also usually a problem in a project. So even there are big deviation from between the panel, the review committee, and also the working group. Okay, so this is a gap. Not always the review committee has right. I think so sometimes they also have the wrong expectation. So I think this is why what I experienced in my working is since 3 years about this the interdiscipline project. Yeah, okay, I think this is my first round to share with you. Okay, thank you.
让我做一个中文的摘要，在每一个那个评论者啊。不过很快的把我听到的跟大家报告，如果有缺的话，再请那个林老师说一下哈。当然一开始早期的学问是没有分科的啦，好，那么或许这个呢可以帮助我们重新去想象跨领域这件事情在当代好要怎么样的进行好。那在很基本上面，我们都是哲学家好。只是住在哲学家不同的领域里面，那这个事实上可以给我们一个初步的信心，我们还是有跨领域的基础在的。第二个呢是当然太早分科了，太早被学门领域 institutionalize 好。第三个呢就是他建议，李老师建议呢，或许呢 common ground 是可以从 problem solving 真实世界问题的解决 task 里面好来汇集大家来进行跨领域的。那么或许呢，回到前学科的日常经验里面，可以作为学科领域的跨领域的一个基础。最后他谈到跨领域的他遇到的一些核心的困难，不是方法论的困难，而是价值面的不一样。这个怎么样子取舍，事实上是尚待解决的。最后他谈到呢，这个怎么样界定我们研究或教学的跨领域研究或教学的成果这一点，其实各个人看法不一样。他这样子评论跟给一些意见，我们紧接着就请傅兆伟傅老师，谢谢。
Thank you very much. Yeah, today our topic is interdisciplinary rarity, okay, and the university change. when I first saw the title, I have a feeling that, oh, this kind of title is very popular in Taiwan. It's not fashion. Nowadays in Taiwan, it's like some funding agencies like Ministry of Education and Ministry of Science and Technology. Lots of projects, lots of funding programs are entitled interdisciplinary this and that. But when later I read through Professor Worton's his PowerPoint file and his lecture, I appreciate quite a few things. But also I have some doubts and problems, questions that I like to ask Professor Worton or something. The first is about appreciation. I think Professor Worton especially emphasized the kind of difficulties that interdisciplinary programs or interdisciplinary studies can encounter or have to overcome. I think he emphasized like the problem of languages. Okay, if you want to do interdisciplinary studies, that you have to kind of know the languages of different disciplines in order to do effective interdisciplinary work. It's not only you got a middle ground. I think somewhere in your PowerPoint you mentioned that it's not only about we get a middle ground or then we can do interdisciplinary work. No, we have to do more than that. You have to go inside the languages of the other discipline and then out. And then you can be fluent in several disciplines in order to do interdisciplinary work. I think this is a very good way to put it. For I doing teaching and research in Taiwan over 30 years. From time to time I have feelings and questions about this kind of a requirement. Okay, and also I think he rightly pointed out there are issues for the teachers, for the professors and teachers in Taiwan's university, because interdisciplinary department or programs cannot easily get higher credit, okay, than other more traditional or more official, more strong discipline or something like that. So take a look at the Taiwan's Ministry of Science and Education. Every year we have this kind of award of distinguished professorship, right? Distinguished scholar, 杰出奖, okay? And most of them, they're in the strict disciplinary context, okay? Hardly I can see anyone can get an interdisciplinary. So there are consideration, and also about promotion. Young professor get promotion. If you are in a sociology department, you're doing interdisciplinary, then people would ask, oh, is this sociology? Is the journal you published is a sociology journal? So I think all these are kind of real problems and real questions we need to overcome. So I think I appreciate that Professor Worton emphasized that, and it's not easy things to do. Okay, okay, and then secondly, I like to raise some problems. Okay, for the interdisciplinarity that Professor Worton tried to emphasize. I think first, I think my major problem is about it. Okay, let me put it this way. I think somewhere in your talk you mentioned, I think very rightly, 3 requirements to have a very good interdisciplinary program. Okay, 3 elements. One is the governmental demand. Okay, strong governmental demand. The second is that you emphasize the academic reflexivity. For the academic world or in the universities, the professors has to be reflexive, has to understand or to spontaneously realize the importance of interdisciplinarity. Okay, you cannot just respond to the government or like a Ministry of Education or Ministry of Science and Technology. Oh, nowadays we have a big project. The government now is trying to emphasize the interdisciplinary program. So all our professors will have to unite together and try to seize that big project. Okay, and the university president, they will encourage you, yes, to seize that money. from the Ministry of Science and Technology. Okay, so but in this process, our academics has no real reflection. We only see the big money from the Ministry of Education or something. We don't really realize that whether in our discipline like anthropology or history or what, do we really have the need to do interdisciplinary work? I mean, this is very important things. It's my feeling nowadays in Taiwan. And also, of course, the third one is the object of knowledge. And of course, interdisciplinary projects are usually doing a very important object of knowledge. That's without question. So my question will lead to the second problem. The first is, my first problem was that it's not easy to, in Taiwan, to have the proper academic reflection, okay, in order to do interdisciplinary. Many of us are just driven by the requirement from our public funding agency or driven by our president of our universities. Because in Taiwan, our university are, comparatively speaking, our resources are inadequate. Okay, we are underfunded if we compare to some top university in China, Japan, Korea, Singapore, or something like that. Taiwan's university are underfunded. So that, and our funding agency are relatively rare. Our most important funding agency are only two, Ministry of Education and Ministry of Science and Technology. We have relatively few private funding agencies in Taiwan. So this is the situation becoming, that is to become a situation in Taiwan that is our academic reflection is relatively weak. We cannot afford a very strong reflexivity because the funding agency situation and Taiwan's university things. Okay, that was my first problem. The second problem is that about the education, about the students. Okay, I think Professor Worton quite rightly, and he seems to me very optimistically thinking that, undergraduate program, master program, and doctoral programs are all important in the interdisciplinary programs, or can be interdisciplinary programs. I don't know, maybe in UK it's very good, I don't know, and also in France maybe. But I kind of doubt it in Taiwan, okay? Because in Taiwan's situation, I just like to compare, okay, to like a dialogue. In Taiwan, nowadays, Taiwan has become an aging society, an aged society, okay? Our aged people has more population than very young people, okay? And so for the undergraduate student in Taiwan, now we have a very rapidly decreasing number of registration and application for undergraduate, and also for master and for graduate program as well. Okay, so in this situation seems to me that students, it's the market of demand. Okay, they can ask, because the students are relatively few. If we offer some very new program or something, you have to convince the students that, oh, this program, although, I mean, first that their parents never heard about this program, okay? So they have to answer their parents, why do I need to go to that program? The first one. The second one is that you need to be sure that after graduation, 4 years, you can get a good job, or maybe a very good graduate program or something. Okay, so my problem is that, or my question is that, under these circumstances, for some new interdisciplinary programs, if that kind of program haven't been proved to be a very effective program in Taiwan, then usually it will be doubted, okay? Unless it has been proved in Taiwan's situation. So that's the kind of a question that I like to raise. Especially, I'm curious about the undergraduate program of the interdisciplinary program. Okay, Because in the undergraduate program we have only 4 years, right? So how can an undergraduate student in 4 years, in addition to the lots of requirement or credit that he or she has to fulfill, to understand or get into deeply into at least the 2 languages of the interdisciplinary discipline. That is 2 languages, at least the 2 languages of the disciplines. Okay, if you want to do interdisciplinary work, right? Because I had emphasized the importance of the language problem. You have to learn deep into the language. But for the undergraduate program, how can he or she in their undergraduate years to be very good at physics, okay, and very good at sociology? Okay, so that seems to me a daunting, as you also pointed out, it's a daunting problems, or you have to convince students. I think it's quite a hell of a job to convince students to do that. So this is the situation I'm kind of more suspicious or pessimistic in Taiwan's current situation. Okay, and finally, I'd just like to repeat again from my past experience. I think I've been teaching in Taiwan for more than 30 years. Okay, for the first 15 years, Taiwan's Ministry of Science, Technology, and Ministry of Education doesn't have so much funding money compared to my second stage. That is the last 15 years. So in the first stage, first 15 years, my experience is that many of my colleagues or friends in the university, we are relatively spontaneous. We do our research and then gradually we realize the importance of cross-disciplinary. We talk to anthropologists, we talk to philosophers and or physicists or some others peoples. There's the spontaneity there, and I enjoyed that period of time. But later on in my second period in Taiwan, Taiwan's government become more emphasized in the funding process. They spend a lot of money, try to funding this and funding that, and to attract a lot of university administrators to comply with them. Okay, and university administrators, in turn, they will demand we professors to work together as a team to catch or to compete to get funding from the Ministry of Education or something like that. Okay, so ironically, my feeling is that in the first stage we do have quite a lot academic reflexivity. But we don't have a strong governmental demand. That's the first stage. Whereas in the second stage, we have strong governmental demand, but we don't have much academic reflexivity. So that's the situation. I'd like to ask your advisors or respond. Thank you very much.
教授，不好意思，还是允许我做中文摘要。如果有错的话，好，再请那个傅老师说明一下。傅老师谈到2个部分，好，第一个部分呢是有关他说的 appreciation， 有关于Worton教授的演讲，他觉得有2点他是觉得蛮好的。第一个他提到呢，要跨领域的话，大概必须要在不同的语言里面，他这边的语言比较像是专业的概念嘛，好 conceptual system， 好，而不是我们自然的中文法文这样。其实这边强调的是说，你在每个学科里面你要熟，你要了解对方的语言，才能进行真正的跨领域。第二个部分呢是不要太 rosy， 现在遇到一个跨领域很大的困难是支持跟奖励系统在我们制度面跟校园文化面也没有被建立起来，这样最后第2个部分是有关问题的部分，因为他听起来他傅老师呢还是觉得 那个Worton教授太乐观了。第一个部分呢是有关于Worton引的一个有关的 Andrew Barry and Joe of the Gina Bone 的一本书的一段话，他写 Interdisciplinarity has come to be at once a governmental demand, a reflexive orientation within the academic, and an object of knowledge。好，那傅教授呢是质疑前面两个概念在现实面上是不是有可能是 coherent 一致的？好，也就是呢有没有可能是政府的要求 demand 受制于政府，同时要进行这个在学院里面的学术的autonomy 或是自主或反省的，这两个似乎在他的经验里面，最后傅老师在谈前15年后15年那个历史里面，他是觉得是非常有冲突的。好，所以他请教那个Professor Worton 呢，这个 academic autonomy 或者跟那个governmental demanding can it be possible at once to achieve via interdisciplinarity？ 是，谢谢。是，最后一个呢是有关 education 呢，他认为特别在大学部是一件有各种因素是过于乐观的，做这个那个跨领域的教育这么一块这样。好，细节我就不说，谢谢。And I'm just make a Chinese summary for 我们是不是请那个我们的第一 round 的讲者上位讲完了，我们再进入那个dialogue。那dialogue我还是给 Professor Worton 呢比较有 priority 去先回答。我们现在就请那个我们的张文根张教授。
Thank you. It's my honor to join this afternoon's discussions and then really triggering a lot of my deep thinkings about interdisciplinary methods or studies. So I appreciate a lot of your remarks, and I want to just divide my talk into three perspectives. So first is really about the demand of interdisciplinary study or research. And then I think this is really has created a huge crisis for universities. So I am not surprised at all that in your one of the slides you mentioned that right now the demands for interdisciplinarity come from the government. So maybe I understand that you know in a quite easy way coming from a lawyer perspective. So anyone would have a experience working in the government today know to solve any single problem, even as simple as traffic regulation, requires actually interdisciplinary perspectives. For example, in Taiwan, there has been a discussion about whether you would allow the free traveling during the vacation periods, holidays on the highway. So there are a lot of debates, right? Whether if you allow free traveling for the highway during the vacation period, of course you invite even more traffic, right? But then there's this rights, right? That's the whole purpose of vacation. And there's this law, right? Legal perspectives, right? And then there's air pollution issues, right? And then when you have vacation, actually when you allow free traveling, you actually have bad air. Then everybody goes on the vacation with very bad air. So you see, it's very easy from the government perspective to solve a lot of issues facing government right now, not only as difficult as climate change, but as easy as traffic regulation. Actually requires a lot of different disciplinary perspectives. And then once you settle with the facts, the law, the policy, and you also need to communicate. So actually, the students with literature, with very high skills of writing things to communicate with the public, are actually also valued. But then you cannot find this combination of talent in any single ministry. Right? You can find very good engineer in the Ministry of Transportation. You can find very good lawyers in the Ministry of Justice. But you cannot find all the required talents in all these departments and ministries. So I couldn't agree with you more that there is this high demands of interdisciplinary talents or skills in really resolving those issues we are confronting every day. But then why I said, and I agree with you, this is actually created a huge crisis in the universities. Because what's being valued now is really the importance of resolving the real issues in some urgency facing the human societies, right? Climate change, gender inequalities, all these issues require, as I said, not only the good engineer, right, good lawyer, good policy communicators, right, psychology, to understand the public knowledge, why they would go against a very good government regulation, right? Sometimes a very good judgment from lawyer perspective, but then the judges delivering that judgment will be heavily criticized by the society. So there is something wrong, right? And but then what's needed here and what's being appreciated here is really the kind of interdisciplinary skills to resolve the real issues. But this has not been appreciated in universities, right? So practical solving skills have not been appreciated in terms of their high quality of research excellence, right? So if I work together with a lot of disciplinary experts and then resolve this very difficult problem of, say, aging society, right? So right now, do you provide more with the old people or do we provide less for the old people because they are caused a lot of the societies, right? And there's this inequality between the age and the young, right? So there are a lot of issues. Even if I resolve this excellently, then I would not be appreciated, right? In terms of then what kind of scholarly excellence you have here in terms of having this very complex problems resolved with other disciplinary experts. So I think a lot of times the revolution or the change will have to come from the modesty of disciplines, right? Modesty, yes, modesty of law, modesty of philosophy, modesty of science, modesty of chemistry, and so on and so forth, right? Because they thought all the time, like when I obtained my PhD in law, right? We know what the law is, right? What's the fundamental, and then I would be, you know, a great scholar in teaching law, in resolving the legal issues, right? But the criteria of judgment come from the law, right? But right now, the issue is not only the law. The issue is really, as I said, as simple as a traffic regulation during the holidays. Require not only the very good legal knowledge, but actually multidisciplinary knowledge, including communication skills. Then there's no discipline, I would argue, actually, to say this is good, right? This is excellent, right? They are as excellent as that I solve a very difficult legal question in the discipline of law. Right? So I think I see the problem in a lot deeper way in terms of not only this institutional and all that. There is a very profound difficulty in terms of how to appreciate this excellence of knowledge in combining all different disciplines, resolving a very practical issues. And I think this will require some revolutionary breakthrough in terms of the philosophy disciplines and the way we understand science and knowledge. So that's one thing. And so I will actually agree with you that, but also in a way disagree with you, that I think it's easy to teach, well not to teach, to have undergraduate interdisciplinary classes. Say I can summon a group of students, right students, and who wish to, resolve climate change issue or resolve just the garbage collection coordination issue in the universities, or to resolve the traffic regulation, as I said, right? And students, the younger generation, will be very creative in trying to find the ways of their own. Right now, all the students will have laptop, will have the connection to the internet, would chat, would tweet a lot of things. So they actually can find the ways to resolve. So, but it's actually more difficult. In this sense, I will agree with Professor Lin. It's actually more difficult to have a group of scholars with already their own disciplines to work in an interdisciplinary way to teach those group of students. So from what I can see, sometimes I think students are doing much, much better interdisciplinary than the scholars. I think the professors are really the problems. The students are the solutions, honestly. And then you see the difference between Google, right, and those Microsoft and universities. You see Google, those big companies, now they know where the niche lies. So they hire all these bright young people and then give the room, the space, the freedom, then ask them to resolve an issue at whatever you take, right? But in universities, those bright students, once they come into the universities, they come into the departments with all of us, those very old professors, without any good skills, to solve the real problem in today's complex world, right? And so this is, I think what's being challenged is the institution of university. Yeah, it's not, you see Google, FB, all these private institutions, they are doing much, much better. But then what obstructs universities to move forward is really the underlying premise of what universities are, right? So that's really what I want to talk about first, and then I will invite your further deeper thoughts and reflections on that. The second is when it comes to interdisciplinarity or interdisciplinary studies, there are again existing disciplines which have already been developing interdisciplinarily. For example, in the field of law. So I come from the field of constitutional law, comparative constitutional law, and it's been a very advancing area in the law, involving a lot of interdisciplinary methods, right? So we apply empirical studies, political science, psychology, and so on and so forth. But there are also some other very stubborn, if I may, disciplines, and then I don't have any good example, because then I would displease a lot of people here. Well, you say you are abnormal physics, so maybe I can mention physics, architecture, right? Or so what I want to say is there is a huge difference in degree of interdisciplinarity in all these different disciplines, right? And so then I want to again seek your advice, so invite you to reflect on that. Would it be better? I feel like I'm actually much better off working in the existing discipline that's already open to interdisciplinarity, rather than working from the scratch with a few of other disciplines that have wisdom, stubbornness of opening to other kinds of knowledge and other kinds of methods, right? And so So there is, again, maybe this is a profound question or it's just a question of strategy, right? So when we talk about interdisciplinarity, should we pick a few disciplines that are now quite open? Then we start from there. Or we try to, and I think what Professor Fu referring to our government is that they are doing things very formalistically. They just try to push a few disciplines together to make a full salad. And in disregard of what degree and kind of openness they have in that kind of discipline. So that's, and then this also linked to my second question is interdisciplinarity is really the discipline or subject matter. Right? So in your remark, you mentioned that example of hiring a specialist studying in 18th century French philosophy or 18th century philosophy, right? In my faculty, right, we often would be debating about whether to hire a Japanese law specialist or a French law specialist or a German, public law specialist. And then other professors will also argue, do we need to hire somebody who studied 18th century German law? Come on, now it's 21st century. Shall we hire the one study robot, right? The law and technology or technology law, right? And so, but then I would say, or maybe you would say, well, we can still hire somebody study 18th century German philosophy as long as he or she study in a totally different way. Right? So in the past, they would only study in a very rigid historical methodology. Right? Now, they will look into how ordinary people lived in 18th century Europe, right? Or how women saw a lot of different things in 18th century Europe. So in other words, it's really how revolutionary we are, right? Or it's really about the subject matter, or it's really about the methodology, right? So when we focus on interdisciplinary, maybe we are still hiring those studying German law, those studying Japanese law, but we're hiring those studying them in different methods. Is that interdisciplinary enough to you? Or we are talking about something totally different, like in my faculty, right? So two factions of faculty will fight each other, saying, no, 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 stop hiring anyone studying German law. We should hire someone studying physics and law, right? And how you appreciate this kind of fight, right? If this person seeking the position is studying 19th century German law with a very interdisciplinary methodologies, points of view, and this law and technology, maybe, it's just the subject matter is really not truly interdisciplinary. Well, of course, whatever truly interdisciplinary might mean, right? So this is really my second point. But I think I have taken too much time. I will just reserve my last for the second round if there's any. Thank you.
我很快的从后面讲，张老师主要谈到3点。第一点我不是太清楚，最后一点是在谈说他请教Worton教授呢，所谓跨领域是什么？是方法论上面的跨领域，还是主题上面的跨领域？那就是这个是不大一样的你可以是一个非常古老的一个纯法律的，可是研究方法上面可以是跨领域的等等，或者是法律与科技、法律与 AI 这样在主题里面是跨领域的。所以这个跨领域的意思是什么样子？这个第二个呢是如果要操作面的话，这个有没有所谓比较开放的学科，已经有跨领域的基础或经验，或者比较古老封闭，我这样讲不讲？那个学科就策略上有没有这样的区分？那有这样的区分的话，策略上是不是比较从开放的学科开始做这样？最后第一个呢是那个就比较难 catch 张老师的意思，这样。
好，我的第一个问题事实上是 现在现实社会面对很多现实问题，其实都需要跨领域的方法来解决，这是很清楚。所以政府或企业都看到这一点。问题是，这种能够解决方法的整体的多元跨领域的知识，并没有办法能够被我们的知识传统所 appreciate 那所以被挑战的事实上是大学跟知识传统。那我们的知识传统怎么样发展出新的paradigm 或者是新的premise？ 那这个能够让这样子的东西被 appreciate， 事实上是我觉得是很困难的事情。
Okay, now we should have Professor Worton
Right, you're glad to know I need only 5 hours to reply to those comments. As I was listening to them, each of the panelists made, I think, very powerful points and very different points. But I think there were some underlying similarities. What I'll try and do is to actually deal with some really quite top-level issues which were, in fact, emerging in different ways from the 3 different participants. Now, I'd like to thank you all. It was really, really, really helpful, really interesting, and wonderfully creatively challenging. So, thank you. I liked it. It does seem to me, if I can start at the very end, that what we are actually talking about here is a structural problem and a conceptual problem. I'm interested in structural change only because I believe that conceptual change is urgent. So it's the conceptual dimension about difference and how we live in and with difference that drives all of my thinking. I do not believe that we can be without universities. When we look at our history across the world, there have been very few times when universities have been abolished. In every case, when universities were abolished, the countries suffered. So universities depend on governments. I don't think that's necessarily a good idea, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. We need somebody to fund us, and in many cases, the government may be better than... I would not like to be run by Zuckerman, for instance. I would not like Facebook or Google or whatever to run a university. It does seem to me that our universities are not, though, as fit for purpose for where we are at the moment as they might be. And I think this has been an organic change in the world. Personally, I think globalization is actually, after all, a good thing, but I think it has brought some terrible things with it, which have made inequality much greater rather than much less. It has made intercultural understanding much less important, but on the other hand, you've got organizations like Facebook, which facilitate tribalism, and young people have their Facebook friends who are like them, and what they should be doing is talking to people who are not like them, who don't think like them. And that's what universities are actually good at. There's something I'll be quoting tomorrow because it's one of the most beautiful things I think I've ever heard from anybody talking about universities who is not actually a university person, who went to university and so on. But he said universities should be places where we can talk with strangers. And it is the most profound thing I've ever heard about a university. Because it doesn't mean to say talk with foreigners or with different disciplines. It means every kind of difference. We are all different from each other. And because we are places where we discuss with other people who are not like us, who don't think like us, we are the best antidote to the power of government. The best counterpoint to tyranny, to oppression. I do believe that we are potentially great forces for freedom and great forces for social cohesion and great forces for social mobility. I'm also a pragmatist. I'm an idealist, but a pragmatist. We have to work out how we can work. With governments, the only way I can talk is by my experience of working with governments myself. When working in the UK, creating a research council, working on the research council in France and in Germany, working with government bodies in the Middle East. When every time I've tried to persuade governments that they should go on funding research and universities, but that they should change the way they're funded. In most cases, they say, very interesting idea, Michael, thank you very much. And they go on doing what they always did. But they do shift slightly. I think that the challenge that were made about Taiwan, I was very sensible to what you were saying. I thought it was very, very interesting and in some ways very worrying. On the other hand, I would say that as an outsider, looking in at Taiwan, I have seen that some of the government initiatives have actually looked very enlightened to me. Now, it may be that they haven't worked out as enlightened for you and your colleagues, but certainly I would like governments to care about, at least in some ways, about the social fabric. So I think things like university social responsibility, I think the mere fact that they've created a program called something like that, I think is actually quite significant. If the detail isn't right, fine. We have always got to try and make things better. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is the fact that we in universities like labels. And basically we are fetishists. We are fetishists of labels. We like to fetishize internationalization, innovation. Why do this? There's always something which universities must do. And at one point I used to laugh because I would read every single strategy in the UK. They were talking about internationalization. And I would say, so I've read them all. I'm slightly obsessive, you will have picked that up. I read them all, and only 2 of them would ever talk about the importance of modern, different foreign languages in an international strategy. I said, this is just very bizarre. So you believe that internationalization is correct, but only 2, my own university where I've written the strategy, and one that had copied my strategy actually mentioned it. I said, but this is crazy. How can you think about expanding to the east unless you're actually interested in, how do you actually train some of our own people to speak Mandarin, or indeed to speak Cantonese, or to speak Japanese, or to speak whatever. So, in some ways, we have, I think, to keep together the dual vision of, let's call it a utopian idealism of the perfect, and the pragmatism of the realist. And in some ways, here I go back to ancient Greece. You're absolutely right at the very beginning to talk about the ancient philosophers, and in the sense that Confucius as much as for Aristotle and Plato, is that ancient philosophy was actually thinking and working in a much more interdisciplinary way because we had not coded the world. We hadn't coded it into disciplines. It was very much more problem-driven than we realized. But actually what they were trying to do is how do I exist in the world? That's a problem, and they were trying to solve it. So even Aristotelian medicine, when he talks about the uterus, little animal that runs around the body, we all know that is completely physically untrue. But it comes out of a desire to try and understand what we would now say happens through hormonal change during the process of gestation. So it was actually driven by a goal. And I think what we've done is as we've become more and more specialized in our own disciplines, we have lost sight of the virtue of goal. We have made another god, another fetish of curiosity-driven research. I do think curiosity-driven research is absolutely vital. It must be protected above all. Curiosity-driven must be. Abstract research, fundamental research must be preserved. But we must also be very careful about the kind of research question that we're asking. I think that's, if we talk more about research questions than certainly we do in the West, I think we would make a lot of progress. Because I think it would actually help with the kind of issues you talk about with law, for instance, because law is becoming like the new psychology. I used to think when I would be chairing professorial committees first of all, it's anthropology. When I was first chairing, I first started chairing all the professorial committees in London, in UCL. One day it could be anthropology, the next day it would be physics. I'm not a specialist, but I'm good at judging people, and I know the questions to ask. But I realized that anthropologists were taking over the world. They were doing everything. There were physical anthropologists, there were biological anthropologists, there were neurological anthropologists, there were psychological anthropologists, everything. Then the next thing was, it was economists doing the same thing. They suddenly were neurological economic, health economic, taking over the world. And I think now it's law, which is taking over absolutely everything. Everything is with law. And of course we know that nothing is ever solved except by law. And it may sound like a joke, but it's actually because what these disciplines are doing is what all of our disciplines want to do, I think, which is actually to open doors. I think there has been a certain closing of doors to focus on more and more profoundly narrow research questions, when perhaps we need to be opening more doors and windows to let unpleasantness and wind and dirt and dust and complications fly in. In one of the Greek myths, there is a box which nobody is supposed to open. And of course, one human being has got to open the box. And it's called Pandora's box, because Pandora opens it, and out of it flies all of the problems in the world. They all fly out. And one says she was so stupid. But the story ends by saying, yes, but the other thing that was left in the box and then slowly came out of it was hope. And I was thinking about this because the expo tomorrow that Professor Joe and colleagues have been doing has as the acronym HOPE. And universities are actually bastions of hope. I think because we are saying we can always make the world a bit better. Physically, emotionally, legally, socially, whatever. We are the bastions of hope. And I think interdisciplinarity is a way of trying to give some kind of scientific and methodological meat to that driver of hope, which is what research is really trying to say. I want to make the world that little bit better by making there be a little bit more knowledge. Knowledge, I think, is genuinely power. But it's not power to control, it's power to be. And I think that's what we're trying to do in university. But I think some of the other things I would like to do is I think that I love the way that at the beginning Professor Lee was talking about the importance of teams. And I think in many ways what he was talking about was very much about the importance of agency of research leaders. That actually what we forget to tell, especially young colleagues, when we want them to run big research projects, is actually the most important thing you can do is choose your team well. And choose them so they bring different strengths together. And these are things which are seen as just practical things to do, whereas actually they're part of the whole conceptual essence of what a research project is. And so I suppose I keep coming back time and time again to the sense that what we need to do is actually change what the university is. I don't think we can just say, let's abolish them all now and start again. I don't think we can also say, let's just let them evolve at their own pace, organically. I do think they need some pushing. I do want them to stop being just about economic and benefit. I think they do need to be aware of more than that. And that's where we have to create some kind of unholy alliance with governments, but also with big business. Big business is just as frightening, if not more, than government. I've had some big fights when I have got money from big business, is actually saying to them, no, you will not stop us from... When I was setting up a small campus in Australia on energy and resources, I got money from all the biggest, hundreds of millions of dollars, US dollars, from the oil and gas industry. But they said, of course, you cannot talk about nuclear energy because we don't want nuclear energy, because we want control of coal and gas. And I said, no. I told you this. I told your lawyers this when you signed the contract. You cannot tell us what we can do or what we cannot do. And industry is always trying to tell us what to do. It says we pay, therefore I say no, you give. Different. You're not paying us, you're giving to us, it is generous. So we will always have to make pacts with not the enemy, but with people who are not necessarily always our greatest friends. But we need to work with them. And one of my biggest personal crusades is to try and encourage colleagues to understand how they work with government, which in my country is much less about working with ministers. They change all the time, but with the civil servants, and the civil servants are always there. So I think that so much of what we need to be doing now is actually realizing that we are part of a very, very, very complex ecosystem. We used to think we were the top of the pile. We were where all the clever people went, and we provided all the people who became powerful. Whereas actually now I think we are in a much more complex ecosystem, but where we have values which I do not believe Facebook and Google have. I do not believe that Microsoft have. I admire enormously what the founder of Microsoft did. He and his wife are amongst the most generous of research funders. In their approach to research, they're wonderful. The way they give out money is they find people who are good and say, I want to give them some hundreds of millions of dollars to deal with AIDS or malaria or whatever. It's a fantastic way of looking at it. But nonetheless, he also understands profit margins. So I think we have to work with different kinds of masters, working in patriarchal ways. We try and make them more feminine, perhaps. But we certainly make them more aware that we are essential to the ecosystem, but we are not the only players in it. And that, I think that interdisciplinarity does actually help us in that battle to establish our own specialness, our own uniqueness.
Thank you. I think now we open for. 是不是可以也把那个您的单位好，就方便做记录，谢谢。
College of Public Health. Okay. Regarding to your talk, in fact, National Taiwan University starting probably about 5 years ago, already started to have interdisciplinary lectures every month in different college, starting from the president. Because of what we learned, UC Berkeley, they had a vice chancellor, and started to have the program called interdisciplinary research and the to move. So we already started several years ago. What I was trying to ask you is, I think, I remember the Hutchins at Chicago University mentioned about the great books, okay? And so those people who have to be graduated have to learn some evolution by Darwin, some those kind. So we call it liberal education. In Taiwan, actually, we have undergraduate called liberal education. I'm not so sure about the French system, but I know in UK system they put a liberal education even earlier, even at high school. So in Taiwan, because of competition of the exam, so we started on the freshman. So our past university president 傅斯年 actually started to have our required course to learn about traditional 史记我不知道英文怎么讲 the historical milestone book. Okay, so we have to read. We have one semester for historical milestone book, and then the other one for 一个是史记，一个是左传. Okay, those are very important humanity education. So he thinks humanity education is very important. So we have that. We have that in Taiwan during the undergraduate. So whatever you say, the interdisciplinary education at a bachelor degree, undergraduate, master, I think it will be much better at the master degree level, because undergraduate we already have liberal education. I think we should broaden up our liberal education, even strengthen more in liberal. That's my point to give you the feedback.
Thank you.
Okay.
那个我们尽量简短。
OK， 我快好了。OK. The second one, I just want to say, in research level, in our field, public health and medicine, we already have interdisciplinary journals such as PLOS One. So we already have the teaching, the problem solving already teaching. The major problem, as three common professor mentioned, are the teachers are so hard to change. So you probably can give us some comment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other question or comment?
Hi, I'm Yu Qingguo from National Chengkong University. Thank you for your speech. It's fascinating. And my question is, in academia, we are surrounded by the terminology, for example, teaching and research methods and research-leaded teaching, or things like terminology like this. And I wonder how this phrase or terminology is contextualized in interdisciplinary cooperation.
Roberto, in international business. Can I call you Miguel? Okay, merci, monsieur. Horizon 2020 is going to the end. What will happen in 20? You must forgive me, okay? Especially in higher education, in general, in France. Are you going to pick up the era of Louis XIV in every possible ways? France is a great country. I was there for business assignments. But what about your neighbor, Italy? Are you going to hand in hands, work through the so-called valleys of death? I'm a disciple. Okay, and right now I'm here, but my heart is there. Merci, monsieur. 谢谢林老师。
已经举手了，我们先请这位老师。是。
Okay, my name is Shu Jian. My major is nursing, and I serve in the National Yangming University. The nursing is nothing but editing or something. So I feel I'm glad that I went to, because it's my professor sabbatical, I went to UK 2 weeks ago. I really appreciate the atmosphere and how people can work together. And my question is that I feel the director, I applied, I chose some core in the university. I went to the Oxford University and the University of Manchester. I wrote many letters I pick up the gender study center or the ethic, ESO center or social care. And finally, I was successful to go to the ESO center. I really appreciate the director, his generosity and the diplomatic strategies, and he became the 3 directors of the ethic-related institute. So my question is, the first one, you also mentioned when the boss, he got the big money funding, how to make the things can change and make people cooperate well. And yeah, that's the first question. The second question, I feel that there's a lot of gap, not only the artificial gap, a lot of gap between in my society. And in your society, I found always people work, especially academic people, work together very well. So I really enjoy my academic trip in your country. However, I also feel that such as the football, you have 4 teams in your country. If it's only one team, probably you are the champion. So my next question is that how do you pick up the people can work together, and how do you accept that that's a gap there? We don't need to break through. And how can, I think as a good leader, or you will pick up something that are workable and something just leave it alone. Thank you.
Okay. Right. The question of liberal education. Of course, I should say that public health has been a leader in this kind of area for a long time. You can't do good public health if you're just working with epidemiologists. So I think that we all have a lot to learn constantly from public health, and especially when you're looking at global public health, where all of that other issue comes into global health. On liberal education, I actually had a very public disagreement with the president of UCL, who's one of my closest friends, with whom I was working for years, about our Bachelor of Arts in Bachelor of Arts and Sciences, the BASC, because he kept saying, this is a true British liberal education. And I say, will you please stop saying that? It is nothing like an American liberal arts degree. It's actually very different, because the liberal arts degree allows you to look at a whole broad range of things. What a liberal arts degree gives you, I think, is a very broad foundation for education. And in that way, I think it's enormously valuable. What we are trying to do is somewhat different, which is actually to say, what we're going to do is we're not just trying to give you a broad understanding of different ways of thinking. What we're actually trying to do is to give you deep skills in 2 areas, let us say in the humanities and engineering, or medicine and architecture, whatever. But more than that, it's looking at how they will work together. And so it's much more structured a way. And it goes back to a point that, in fact, the Professor Fu had made about, would anybody actually find these degrees any use? Who would come to do them? My colleagues often thought of me as being a foolish idealist. And I said, no, I am sure we will get students. We are an aging population, like so many others. And I said, when we're starting, I only want 80 in the first year, and I will get 80. I said, but this is going to be the #1 program in UCL eventually. Undergraduate. For undergraduate, it's a 3 or a 4-year program. We recommend a 4-year. And then everybody said to me, they will only come from the rich middle classes, and from private schools where they've had labs, where they've actually been able to work properly in a well-found laboratory, and they actually know how to do experiments, and they've actually had the advantage of having truly good equipment, whereas in state schools in the middle of cities, they don't have proper laboratories and so on. I said, don't be so sure. We are looking for the top students. We made it quite clear this is the most difficult degree, undergraduate degree at UCL to get into. And when the first year came, we had the highest percentage of young people from poor backgrounds, from inner city, comprehensive state schools. We had the biggest ethnic minority, and by the end of the first year, we had the highest success rate in terms of the class of degrees of any program in the whole, because we were appealing to a different kind of student. And we kept saying to everybody, this is not a degree for everybody. If you want to be an engineer and build bridges, do a BSc in engineering. If you want to be a doctor, do an MBBS. If you want to be a philosopher, do a BA in philosophy. But if you actually see yourself as a future problem solver, this is the degree. But you must have an instinctive desire for problem solving, and you must have an instinctive desire to work with people who are different from you. So actually said, if you don't like people who are different, this isn't really the degree for you. So we in fact, got more than the 80, and it's doubled every year, so it's grown enormously. But it is attracting a particular kind of people. The teachers was, how do I persuade teachers to give up time? Because we had a little bit of money, so we would pay for them to be bought out of their other teaching in their own department. But that meant essentially they were doing more work. But they were all very passionate about it. And initially, we had quite a few young people, young colleagues who were, like so many young colleagues, full of enthusiasm, full of idealism, full of energy. I'm a pragmatist. I knew I needed some senior professors. I couldn't do just with the young people, otherwise I'll be told this is just a young person's degree. It's not serious. It's not worth doing because there are no big professors in it. And so I went on a charm offensive, talking to some of our top star professors, and found there was, first of all, a very, very brilliant neuroscientist, already a fellow of the Royal Society when he was only 40. Brilliant neuroscience. A professor of mathematics who was bringing in research grants, a theoretical mathematician, extraordinary, being put forward regularly for the Nobel Prize. These people were absolutely outstanding, and they said, this is something we want to be part of. It's not all of my life, but I want it to be part of my life. And then Vince, who was the neuroscientist, one day about 3 years after we'd started it, I got on a bus in London, and then Vince got on the bus, and he said to me, Mike, how are you? And I said, oh, tell me, how is the BASC going? He said, oh, it's brilliant, it's just brilliant. And he said, you know, I was on 5% for BASC, so we paid for 5% of the time we paid that. He said, I've now gone to 60%. I love it so much, and I find the students so exciting. I don't want to teach anybody else neuroscience except these students. So I do all my research in my neuroscience library, my big team, but actually this is where my heart is. The professor of maths has now gone 50%. So they have found, it's as if they found a new country for themselves. They're a citizen in 2 countries. And so I think it's that kind of thing that we're doing, where it's not just finding champions, but finding people who actually feel at home in this strange land of otherness. I think on the issue of kind of terminology and reputation, so I think we have an awful lot to do about that. I do think it's very much about language. We forget how important language is in everything that we do. We need to think about not only how our structures change, but how we actually will change the structures and the words that we use for those structures. And in this, I refuse, for instance, to allow a teacher to be promoted to professor on the basis of teaching. And so if anybody knows they were promoted on the basis of outstanding teaching, they'll be seen as second class. If they're seen as promoted for interdisciplinarity, they'll be seen as second class. So we must only have the title professor, full professor, end of story. We don't say for research, we don't say for public engagement, we don't say for teaching, we don't say for interdisciplinarity. So there are times when you need to use words and times when you need not to use them. Right? It's about control, I think. On France in 2020, well, first of all, I would say that 2020 is, as you know, Horizon 2020, what is going to happen when Britain leaves the European Union. Britain is going to go one way or another, it will go. It is a great tragedy. It's a tragedy for the European Union as well as for Britain. What will happen is that research collaboration will continue. Our government has finally, for understandable political reasons, it wasn't going to say this before, now that we are very close to the moment of deciding, our government has said that it will put in all of the funding to researchers in UK that we currently earn from Europe. The thing is, we put in to Europe much less than we get out, because we are actually the strongest bidder from the European Union. So we will stay involved with them, we just won't be a member of the European Research Council area. That's the only difference. We will continue to fund, we will continue to work with our colleagues. But I keep reminding people that 65% of the top researchers in UK universities are from continental Europe. So that actually there are more European Union citizens in our professors than there are British people. How do you make people work together? I have a jokey answer, but it's actually my most serious answer. When I realized that my university was growing too much, we were at 25,000 people. Our student-staff ratio was moving from 5 to 1 to 6 to 6 students to one person. So it's a very good ratio, but it was getting worse. And people didn't know each other as well. So I realized that people didn't come to our Senate meetings, people didn't come to our heads of departments meeting, except the heads of departments, to find out information. It became this whole thing about control. It was the leadership telling the professors what was happening. Hopeless. 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 So I said, what we need to do is two things. One, for every heads of department meeting, every academic board meeting, afterwards there are drinks and food. Now, every professor can go home and have fine drinks and food at home, or they can go out with other people. They don't need, they're not like poor people needing it. But the mere fact that we were putting people together socially changed the whole of the debates. People came because they wanted to see each other, and then the eating and drinking afterwards became actually the place where real business was transacted all the time. People came along, and in a relaxed area they started talking. I then decided that we should have more parties. The big strategy for UCL is every year we have more parties. So when we have elections to the Royal Society, the most senior learned society for scientists, we have a party for them all, and their friends, their families, their departments and so on come along. We have an award for teachers. We have another party. We have a party for public engagement. We have a party almost every week. And this didn't cost very much, but it just meant that people felt valued, and more important, they thought, actually, we are a family. We actually belong together, and suddenly they began to understand each other better and discover how different they were, but also how same they are. And I'll just finish this part of our discussion with words from probably the greatest German philosopher of the last century, Martin Heidegger, who said in a very, very long and very difficult book about identity and difference, he said something fabulous. He said, he's talking about sameness and difference. He said, I can only say the same if I think difference. I can only say difference if I think the same. So I can only say I'm the same as you if I know that we are different, but I can see points of sameness. And I can only say I'm different from you if I can see how there is something which binds us together. So sameness and difference, identity and difference, are actually bound together. And that's what we get in interdisciplinarity, because we are constantly discovering how identity and difference are constantly working together in every dimension of the team working, of the, even of the writing up. And when you're writing up an interdisciplinary article, whose voice is going to become, there must be a single voice, but it can't be one single individual person's voice. It must be a team voice that comes out of it. So there are these wonderful things that come out of actually finding people who like to work in that dance, that dialogue between sameness and difference.
Now you know that why they invite me as the chairperson, because I'm from a faculty department. And too bad we don't have a party after this meeting. Yeah. But time is up. I believe we learned a lot from this lecture and dialogues. Thank you, Professor Worton, and to the commentators. Thank you.